Hi all, welcome to the video lecture series of object-oriented programming. In this video lecture, we'll be discussing about the topic, the throw keyword, and how it is used in exception handling. We know what is an exception now. Exceptions are runtime errors or abnormalities that arises when we run a program. Apart from that, we can create or we can throw an exception manually. So generally an exception will be raised when some unwanted situations occurs. For example, when we divide a number by 0 or when we try to access an element that is out of the array index. All those situations will generate an exception. But apart from that, we the programmers can decide when to throw an exception. So if you want to throw an exception manually or explicitly, we have to use the keyword throw. So when we throw an exception, it can be either checked exception or unchecked exception. The throw keyword is mainly used through custom exceptions. Custom exceptions means exceptions that we create rather than the existing exceptions. And the syntax of this throw keyword is throw the keyword and then the exception that we want to throw. And we use the throw keyword within a method. Okay, the throw keyword because why we are saying like this is because we have another keyword named throws. Throws keyword is coming along with the method signature, that is method header, but the keyword throw is used within a method, that is inside a method. Now we will see one example. In this example we have a class, the class name is test throw1. Inside that we have a method that is static void validate, which is accepting one integer variable as a parameter. We have a main method here, and this method, inside this method validate, we are checking whether the value of the parameter variable age is less than 18. If it is less than 18, then we are explicitly throwing an exception, because a variable value less than 18 is not going to throw an exception, is not going to generate an exception, because that is not an error. Okay, that is not an error situation, but we the programmer is deciding to throw an exception whenever the value of this variable age is less than 18. So that is explicitly or manually we are generating an exception. So for that we have to use the throw keyword. And see, we are actually here in this example we are actually throwing an arithmetic exception, and the name of the exception is given as not valid. Okay, so when we call this method validate, this is the method call statement, we are giving 13 as the input to that method. So the value of age variable will be 13. So when we check this if statement, 13 is less than 18, so the condition is true. So in that situation we are throwing an exception. So since this line is throwing an exception, the program will terminate because we have not written the try catch block to handle. Apart from the existing exceptions in Java, we can create our own exceptions. So if we want to create our own exceptions, we have to write a class which will be extending the main exception class that we will see later. We will be seeing one example, but the general idea is we the programmers can create our own exception classes in Java. So if we are creating our own exceptions, for throwing those exceptions when a situation occurs, we have to use the throw keyword. And the exceptions that we the programmers create are known as user-defined exception or a custom exception. So now we will see an example how to create custom or user-defined exceptions, that is the exceptions that we the programmers can create. So this is how we have to create an exception, that is we have to create a new class which extends the already existing exception class. I have mentioned that this class named exception is the parent of all exceptions that will be generated in Java programs. So even if we are creating an exception, that exception also must be a child of the class exception. So when we create a new exception, we have to create a new class which extends the parent class, that is the exception. So here in this example, in my class named my exception, it is extending the main class exception. So my class my exception became an exception right now. Inside this class I have a string variable str1 and I have a constructor here. So in this constructor it is accepting a variable, a string variable. Okay, and the purpose of this constructor is to assign an initial value to the class variable str1. So whatever may be the parameter we are getting here, that value will be copied to the class variable str1. And there is one method named Tostring method. This method will work automatically when we try to print the object of a class. Not only this class, but generally Tostring method will be automatically generated, or it will be automatically invoked whenever we try to print an object of a class. We will see how it is done. So this is my exception now, because I have written a class named my exception, which is extending exception class. So all classes which extends exception class will be an exception. So now we are going to see how to throw this exception when a situation occurs. So how can we throw this exception using the throw keyword? So always remember, if the exception is a user defined exception or a custom exception, we have to use the throw keyword to throw it. Okay. The other exceptions, that is already built-in exceptions like array index out of bounds or division arithmetic exception, all those exceptions will be generated automatically when such situation occurs. But these exceptions are actually created by the programmers. So that is why they are named as user defined or custom exceptions. So if whenever we need to throw an exception, whenever we want to throw we want to raise a custom or user defined exception, we have to use the throw keyword. So here we have written another class. The name of the class is example1. Inside this we have a main method, and I have written the try and catch block here, because inside the try block I am going to write the lines of code that may raise an exception. So inside this I have included one system.out.println statement, and see, I am throwing the exception that I have created. My exception is an exception right now. I am going to throw that. For that I have to use the keyword throw. Throw new my exception. So this is actually calling the constructor of class my exception here. As you can see, my exception and followed by a pair of parentheses. That means it's a method. So it is having the same name as that of the class. That means it's a constructor. So this is actually a method call to the constructor of this class. As you can see, the parameter is a string, and a string is this is my error message. So this string will be copied to this string variable str2, and then finally that value will be copied to str1. Now why we have done that? It is because, so this line will be generating or raising an exception, so the control will be thrown out of the try block. So here the catch block is written so that it is ready to catch any kind of exception that belongs to my exception type. So I have written the catch block which is ready to catch the exception that is raised here. Here the exception raised is my exception itself. So that exception is caught here, and that exception is copied to the exp. Now what is exp here? What's the type of exp? The type of exp is my exception. That means exp is actually a reference variable of class my exception. Okay. So why we have to use this variable here? Because the exception that we have raised here is that of my exception class. It's actually an object of this my exception class. So if you want to hold an object of a class, we need the reference variable of that class itself. So in order to hold the object raised here of the my expression class, we need the object of that class itself. That is why we are writing my exception exp here. So exp is the reference variable of class my exception, and we are including one system.out.println message, that is we are printing that we are inside the catch block, and this line is that what we mean, what I want to explain. Okay, system.out.println exp. Here exp, as I told you, it is the object or the reference variable of class my exception. So whenever we try to print an object or reference variable of a class, okay, the method named toString will be invoked indirectly. Okay, so generally we need to access a method inside a class by using the object name dot method name. That is the syntax of accessing a method inside a class. But in case of printing an object, whenever we try to print an object, the toString method will be called indirectly. Indirectly means automatically. So here we are trying to print the object named exp. So naturally this toString method will be invoked here. So inside toString method, so this exp, when we write the object name here, it is actually a method call to the toString method, and toString method is returning an expression, oh sorry, a string. My exception occurred plus str1. So what is str1 now? Str1 is equal to str2. What is str2 now? str2 is the message that we passed as the parameter when we invoked the constructor of class myException. That is, this is the sentence that is now inside str1. So myException occurred plus str1 means we are combining two strings. MyException occurred string plus str1. The content inside str1 is, this is my error message. So now this toString method is returning one big string, and that is returned to the line from which that method was invoked, and it was invoked from this pair of parentheses. So that string will be replacing this exp once that method is executed. So now it is actually system.out.println. Inside this we are actually printing the string returned by the method toString. So when we execute this program, we will get first of all starting of try block, because we have used the system.out.println statement here. It is printing starting of try block. Then we are actually raising an exception, so the control is thrown out of the try block, and that exception is called by the catch block. Inside the catch block we have written to print catch block, so it is printing catch block. And then system.out.println exp, we are actually saying to print the exception object exp, but it is printing this message. How this message is displayed? Because that's why I told you, when we try to print an object, it is actually calling the method toString method. So here toString method is written by myself. Inside this we have a line of code that is returning myException occurred plus str1. That is, one string is being returned. So this method call will be replaced by that string, and that string will be displayed here. That is why we are getting this message here. Okay, I hope we shall conclude now. So in this video lecture we discussed about the throw keyword, how to create custom or user defined exceptions, what are they, and how to use the throw keyword to explicitly throw an exception, and we also saw some of the examples. I hope it's clear to you all. That is all in this video lecture. Thank you so much.